Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks.
My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am 62 years old. I never imagined that, after a lifetime of raising children and seeing them grow, life would throw me into a storm that tested not only my strength but also my sanity. If you are watching this, please don't scroll away. What I'm about to tell you isn't just a story, it's a warning. A reminder that sometimes the people you trust the most leave behind shadows you can't explain. It all began the night my son-in-law, Nathaniel, left for a business trip. My daughter, Clara, was working late at the hospital, as she usually did. That meant it was just me and my 7-year-old granddaughter, Isla, in the house. I thought it would be an ordinary evening, story time, a glass of warm milk, and bedtime prayers. But then something happened that still makes my hands tremble as I recall it. The night was unusually silent, except for the ticking of the old wooden clock in the hallway. I was knitting on the sofa when I heard soft footsteps coming down the staircase. It was Isla. Her tiny feet patted against the floor as she approached me. But it wasn't her footsteps that froze me, it was the look on her face. Her cheeks were pale, her lips quivered, and her eyes shimmered with tears. She leaned close to me and whispered, "Grandma. I'm scared." I put down my knitting needles instantly. Scared? Why, sweetheart? Did you have a nightmare? She shook her head firmly. No. He's upstairs. My heart skipped. Who's upstairs, Isla? Her little hands clutched the edge of my sweater tightly. Her voice was barely audible when she replied. Daddy didn't leave. He's still in my room. At that moment, my body stiffened. Nathaniel had left hours ago. I had seen him drive away with my own eyes. I tried to calm myself, convincing my brain that Isla was only imagining things. Children sometimes blur the line between reality and fear. But something in her eyes told me this wasn't a simple childhood fantasy. I forced a smile. Honey, maybe you were dreaming. Sometimes dreams feel real, but they're not. She shook her head again, tears rolling down her cheeks. No, Grandma. He was sitting on my bed. He told me not to tell you. My skin crawled. I knew I couldn't ignore this. Holding Isla's hand, I walked her back upstairs. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the house itself was warning me not to go further. Her room door was half open. The curtains swayed even though the windows were closed. A faint smell, like burnt wood, lingered in the air. See? Isla whispered, pointing at the bed. He was right there. The bed was empty. Perfectly made. No sign of anyone sitting there. I tried to brush it off. Look, sweetheart, no one is here. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. On the wooden chair beside her desk, there was a fresh imprint, as if someone had just been sitting there. The cushion was still slightly indented. I didn't want to scare Isla further, so I said nothing and led her back downstairs. My mind raced for explanations. Maybe Nathaniel had come back briefly? But why wouldn't he tell me? And why would Isla say he told her to stay quiet? I tucked Isla into the guest room bed that night instead of her own. She held onto my arm tightly, refusing to let go even for a second. By midnight, she finally drifted off to sleep. But I didn't. I sat in the chair beside her, listening to every creak, every whisper of the wind against the windows. And that's when I heard it. A faint sound, like footsteps, coming from upstairs. Slow, heavy, deliberate. My pulse quickened. I told myself it was just the house settling, but deep down I knew better. Something, or someone, was still inside. The next morning, Clara came home exhausted from her night shift. I didn't tell her everything, only that Isla had a nightmare. But Isla wouldn't stop clinging to me, refusing to go back into her room. When Clara asked her what was wrong, Isla looked at me, then at her mother, and said softly, "Daddy's here." But not the real daddy. The room went silent. Clara frowned, confused, but I felt a chill run through me. Because in that moment, I realized Isla wasn't just afraid. She was seeing something none of us could explain. And whatever it was, it had chosen her. That was only the beginning. If you're still watching this, stay with me. What happened in the following nights will make you question what you believe about family, love, and the secrets we keep hidden in our homes. I have never felt as vulnerable as I did in those days. I had lived through loss, through the loneliness of widowhood, through raising children alone, but nothing prepared me for the dread that now lived in my granddaughter's eyes. If you are still here, listening to me, please understand, this isn't just a grandmother's imagination. What I'm telling you is real. And the deeper I looked, the more I wished I hadn't. The morning after Isla whispered her fear to me, the house felt heavier than ever. Clara, my daughter, brushed it off. "Mom, she's just a child," Clara said as she poured coffee into her travel mug before heading to the hospital again. "Nathaniel's been under a lot of stress. Maybe she misses him, and her mind is playing tricks." I nodded, not wanting to argue, but my gut told me otherwise. Children sense things adults overlook. And Isla wasn't merely scared, she was haunted. When Clara left, Isla immediately clung to me. "Grandma, don't let me go upstairs. Promise." Her tiny voice carried such desperation that I promised without hesitation. But promises don't stop shadows. That night, after I tucked her into the guest room again, I decided to face my fear. Armed with nothing more than a flashlight and my courage, I went upstairs to check her bedroom. The door creaked open. The curtains fluttered gently, though the windows were tightly shut. A chill prickled my skin. And then I noticed something unusual on her desk. A drawing. It hadn't been there yesterday. Crayon strokes, messy and hurried, but clear enough to make me freeze. It was a sketch of a tall figure with hollow eyes standing beside her bed. And next to it, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "He said don't tell Grandma." I gasped and clutched the paper. My heart thudded so loudly I was afraid it would wake Isla. Someone, or something, was communicating with her. The following day, I decided to confront Clara again. I showed her the drawing. Clara laughed nervously, shaking her head. "Mom, she probably drew that after watching something scary. Kids imagine monsters all the time." But I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Clara," I said firmly, "what do you really know about Nathaniel's trips?" Her face hardened. "What do you mean?" "He's a businessman, Mom. You know that." I leaned closer. "Do you trust him?" She flinched, avoiding my gaze. "Of course. He's my husband." But her voice lacked conviction. That evening, after Clara left for another shift, I stayed downstairs with Isla, keeping the lights on and the doors locked. I was determined not to go back upstairs. But around midnight, the sound returned. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing the hallway above us. My body stiffened. Isla's eyes flew open. She grabbed my wrist tightly. "He's back," she whispered. This time, I didn't try to reassure her. I reached for the phone to call Clara, but just as I did, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise itself. We waited, holding our breaths. Then, suddenly, from the ceiling above us, we heard it, 3 loud knocks. Knock. 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 As if someone, or something, was demanding to be let in. I couldn't sleep after that. By dawn, I decided to search Nathaniel's study. I knew it was wrong, but fear had already outweighed morality. The room smelled faintly of tobacco and leather. Books lined the shelves, but it was the locked drawer in his desk that drew my attention. After rummaging through the cabinet, I found a small key hidden under a photo frame. Inside the drawer were documents, travel tickets, receipts, and letters. But not to Clara. They were written to someone named Mara. My heart sank as I read words of affection that no husband should be writing to another woman. But as painful as this betrayal was, it wasn't the part that terrified me most. The last letter ended with a chilling line. I can't keep the secret much longer. Isla is starting to notice. I dropped the letter, my hands shaking violently. What secret? What was Nathaniel hiding? And why was Isla, an innocent child, involved? At that very moment, Isla appeared in the doorway, her small face pale and terrified. Grandma, she whispered, pointing toward the hallway. I turned slowly. There, in the dim light, was the faint outline of a tall figure at the end of the corridor. Too tall to be human, too still to be real. It didn't move. It just watched. I blinked and it vanished. But Isla's scream told me I hadn't imagined it. That night, I didn't close my eyes even once. I sat awake, clutching Isla to my chest, wondering what kind of darkness had entered our lives. And more importantly, what connection it had to Nathaniel's secret. And if you've followed me this far, I need you to listen carefully. By the time I uncovered the truth, it was already too late to turn back. I used to think betrayal was the worst pain a family could endure. But sometimes, betrayal is just the door that lets something darker step inside. The morning after I found those letters, I was restless. My hands still shook as I replayed that last line in my mind, Isla is starting to notice. What had Nathaniel meant? I tried to shield Isla from my fear. We had breakfast together, but she barely touched her food. Her small fingers traced circles on the table as she whispered, "Grandma, he doesn't like when you go in his room." Her words froze me. Who doesn't like it, sweetheart? She lowered her head. The man with Daddy's face. That sentence shattered the last thread of logic I was holding on to. Nathaniel's face. His presence. His lies. They were all connected somehow, but in a way I couldn't yet understand. That afternoon, while Isla napped, I dug deeper into the drawer in his study. I found an old, leather-bound journal tucked beneath receipts. Its pages were filled with Nathaniel's handwriting, disjointed entries that grew darker with each date. The first entries seemed normal, business notes, reminders, small frustrations. But then, midway, the tone shifted. The dreams started again. He follows me at night. Sometimes I hear him even when I'm awake. I can't tell Clara. She wouldn't understand. Isla, she sees him too. I don't know how to protect her. My breath caught. Nathaniel hadn't just been cheating on Clara, he had been hiding something far worse. That evening, Clara came home, and I confronted her with the journal. She grew pale as she read. This doesn't make sense. Nathaniel never told me anything like this. Her voice broke, and I saw tears welling in her eyes. Mom, are you saying he's sick? That he was imagining things? But before I could answer, Isla appeared in the doorway, trembling. He's here again. Clara and I turned instantly. Where, honey? Clara asked, kneeling down. Isla pointed upstairs. He's standing by the window. He wants me to come. We rushed to her room. The curtains swayed gently, though the windows were shut. Clara tried to be brave, telling Isla it was just her imagination. But I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I walked over to the window and yanked the curtains open. Nothing. Just the empty yard. But as I turned back, I saw something that made my knees weaken. On the glass, faint but visible in the condensation, were words traced by a finger. She belongs to me. Clara gasped, pulling Isla into her arms. I felt my blood turn cold. That night, none of us slept. Clara sat silently, clutching Isla, while I stared at the journal, reading and rereading the final entries. One line, written shakily, stood out more than the rest. If anything happens to me, it will come for her next. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew. Whatever Nathaniel had tangled himself with, Isla was the one paying the price. The following day, I decided to investigate further. I called the number listed on one of Nathaniel's receipts, a motel he had stayed at during his so-called business trips. The man at the front desk confirmed he had been there multiple times. But then he added something that made my heart pound. He never stayed alone. There was always a little girl with him. I froze. What little girl? The man hesitated. I assumed she was his daughter. But Isla had never been there. Clara had never known about it. So who was the little girl? That evening, Clara noticed how pale I looked. She demanded answers, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything yet. The last thing she needed was more grief. Instead, I asked her to trust me. Clara, listen. Whatever Nathaniel was doing on those trips, it's tied to Isla. We need to keep her safe. Don't leave her alone. Not for a second. Clara, though hesitant, agreed. But Isla was growing weaker. She barely spoke, barely ate. At night, she would wake up screaming, her small body trembling as if something had touched her in her sleep. And then, one night, I heard her whisper again. Not to me. But to someone else. Standing in the hallway, I could hear her tiny voice through the guest room door. No, I don't want to go with you. Leave me alone. There was silence, and then, a man's deep voice answering. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Because Nathaniel, and if you've listened this far, you already know the storm we were caught in. But what I haven't told you yet is the night it all escalated, the night the shadow wasn't content with watching anymore. This was the night it reached out for Isla. The house was quiet, too quiet. Clara had taken the week off after reading Nathaniel's journal entries. She was no longer brushing off my warnings. She stayed close to Isla, never letting her out of sight. But fear changes people. And fear had already made Isla different. Her once bright, playful eyes were now dull, her laughter replaced by silence. She would sit for hours staring at the staircase, as if waiting for something. Sometimes her lips moved, whispering words none of us could hear. Clara was desperate. Mom, should we call a doctor? A therapist? Maybe this is all in her mind. But I shook my head firmly. No, Clara. This is not her imagination. Look around, too many things don't add up. The drawings, the knocks, the messages on the window. You saw them too. Clara hugged Isla tighter. Then what do we do? I didn't have an answer. That night, the temperature in the house dropped unnaturally low. The heater was working, but the air felt sharp, biting against our skin. I tucked Isla into bed in Clara's room, not daring to leave her alone. Clara sat beside her, humming softly to calm her. I went downstairs to make tea, hoping the warmth would steady my nerves. But that's when I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, dragging, coming from the hallway upstairs. At first, I thought it was Clara moving around. But when I looked up, I saw her shadow under the door of her room. She hadn't moved. So who was walking outside her door? I climbed the stairs cautiously, flashlight in hand. My heart raced as I approached the hallway. The air was heavy, thick, almost suffocating. Then, I froze. At the far end of the hallway, near Isla's room, stood the figure. Tall. Hollow-eyed. Still. Its face, Nathaniel's face, yet twisted, distorted, wrong. Leave us alone, I whispered, my voice trembling. It didn't move. Instead, it slowly raised its hand and pointed at Clara's door. At Isla. My instinct screamed at me to protect her. I rushed toward the figure, flashlight shaking in my hand. But the closer I got, the more the air thickened, pressing against my chest like invisible hands. And then, just as I reached it, the figure dissolved into smoke, vanishing before my eyes. I stumbled into Isla's room. Empty. Silent. But on the bed, where she had drawn before, was another piece of paper. This one was darker, scratched violently with black crayon. It showed Isla standing between two figures, one of Nathaniel and another, taller, faceless. And beneath it, in her messy handwriting, "He says he will take me soon." I rushed back to Clara's room, where Isla still lay curled up, eyes wide open. "Did you draw this?" I asked, holding the paper. She nodded slowly. "He told me to. He says when Daddy comes back, I have to go with him." Clara's face went pale. "Go where, Isla?" Isla's lips quivered. "To the place under the house." The words sent chills down my spine. The house had a basement, yes, but we rarely went there. It was cold, damp, filled with boxes and memories better left untouched. There was nothing for a child to know about it. And yet Isla had spoken of it. That night, we locked all the doors and windows. Clara and I sat on either side of Isla's bed, determined to stay awake. But exhaustion is cruel. At some point, my eyes closed for what felt like seconds. When I woke up, Isla was gone. Panic ripped through me as I jolted up, shouting her name. Clara woke too, screaming for her daughter. We searched the rooms, the hallway, the bathroom, nothing. Then I remembered her words. The place under the house. We rushed to the basement door. It stood wide open, the darkness inside like a gaping mouth. "Isla." Clara's voice cracked as she called out. From below, we heard a soft giggle. Isla's voice. But it wasn't playful. It was eerie, hollow, echoing unnaturally. We grabbed a flashlight and hurried down the steps. The basement was icy, our breaths visible in the air. The beam of light danced over old boxes, broken furniture, and cobwebs. And then, in the corner, we saw her. Isla stood perfectly still, her back to us. "Sweetheart," Clara whispered, rushing forward. "Come back upstairs. Please." But Isla didn't move. Instead, a man's voice answered. "She's mine now." The sound didn't come from Isla's mouth, but from the shadows behind her. The flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw him again, the tall figure, his. After the basement incident, Clara and I didn't let Isla out of our sight. She was weak, her small hands trembling even when holding a spoon. It felt as if the shadow had drained something from her, her warmth, her energy, her very soul. Clara was frantic. "Mom, we can't stay here. We have to leave this house." I wanted to agree, but deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever this was, it wasn't bound to the walls of our home. It was bound to Isla. And we couldn't run from it. That evening, Clara finally broke down. She grabbed the journal from Nathaniel's study, slamming it on the table. He knew. He knew this was happening, and he left us to deal with it. Her voice shook with rage. What did he do? What secret was he keeping? I had no answers, only fear. But Isla, sitting quietly beside us, finally spoke. He made a promise. We both turned to her. "What promise, sweetheart?" I asked gently. Isla's eyes glistened. Daddy promised him something. But then Daddy left, so now he wants me instead. Those words broke me. Clara fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "No. I won't let this thing take you." But even as she said it, the temperature in the room dropped. The lights flickered. A low hum, like distant thunder, filled the air. And then, he was there. The tall, hollow-eyed figure, standing in the corner of the living room. His face twisted into Nathaniel's, but darker, emptier, like a mask pulled too tight. "Time is up," the voice rumbled. I grabbed Isla, clutching her to my chest. "You can't have her. Leave us alone." The figure tilted his head, eyes fixed on me. A promise was made. Blood for blood. Clara screamed, rushing forward. Take me instead. Not my daughter, the shadow laughed, a sound that shook the walls. Your blood is worthless. Hers is pure. She sees me. She belongs with me. Isla's body trembled violently in my arms. She looked up at me with tearful eyes. Grandma, he says if I go with him, you'll be safe. My heart shattered. I had seconds to decide. I could feel the air crushing around us, the lights flickering wildly. Clara clung to Isla's hand, begging her not to listen. But the shadow was growing stronger, his form solidifying with every passing moment. Choose, he hissed. Or I will take you all. I don't remember the exact words I said, only the desperation in my voice as I begged him to take me instead. I was old, my life mostly lived. Isla was just a child. But he didn't want me. He wanted her. Then, suddenly, Isla let go of Clara's hand. She stood, small but fearless, and whispered, if I go, will you stop hurting them? The figure bent closer, his hollow eyes gleaming. Yes. Clara screamed, no. Isla, don't listen. She lunged forward, but an invisible force threw her back against the wall. The shadow extended its hand toward Isla. She reached out, her tiny fingers trembling inches away from his. And then, everything went dark. The lights went out. The house shook. I heard Clara's sobs, Isla's faint voice, and the shadow's chilling laughter. When the lights flickered back on, he was gone. And so was Isla. Clara collapsed to the ground, screaming her daughter's name, her cries echoing through the house. I searched every corner, every room, every inch of that basement. But Isla had vanished. All that remained was her drawing on the living room floor, a crayon sketch of her holding hands with the tall figure, walking into darkness. Beneath it, in her shaky handwriting, don't forget me. To this day, we never found her. Nathaniel never returned from his trip. Clara lives with grief that no mother should endure. And I live with guilt. Because I was there. And I let it happen. And now, I'll leave you with this question. Backhand index pointing right. If you were me, an old woman holding your granddaughter while a shadow demanded her soul, would you have fought harder? Or would you have let her go to save the rest of your family?